Tonight, we start the show with the brutal police killing of Tyre Nichols. Now, many of you have seen the video, which was released on Friday, of that traffic stop where 5 black police officers literally beat Tyre to death. Now, we made a choice here. We're not going to show that video here. In fact, I've been trying to avoid it. I just don't want to see another black man get killed at the hand of the police. But these are people who took an oath to protect and serve, and we got to haul them out and hold them accountable. Since the video came out, there have been protests in Memphis, New York, and other cities. People are calling for change. They're calling for accountability, and they're calling for laws that keep this from happening.
I feel this situation, it was not the first time. It might be the first time they got caught where a person died. And the question that I've been trying to figure out is, if he wouldn't have died, were you guys really going to take him to 201 Poplar in that condition? How many people have you done that to?
201 Poplar is the address of the Shelby County Jail in Memphis. These are the 5 officers who have been arrested, charged with second-degree murder, and released on bond. They're set to appear again in court on February 17th. Now, some legal experts are questioning if the second-degree murder charge against the officers will even stick. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, there are calls to revive the failed George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act failed in the Senate in 2021 after clearing the House, largely along party lines. The Congressional Black Caucus has asked for a meeting with President Joe Biden this week to talk about police reform and figure out how they can move negotiations forward. Joining me now to discuss all of this is Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. She is a 20-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department. She's an author, and she is a mother of 4 sons. We're also joined by Olayemi Olurin. She is a movement lawyer and a political commentator. I want to thank you both for being here tonight. Sergeant Dorsey, I'm going to start with you. When you look at a video like this, when you look at the footage from the body cam, when you look at the footage from the surveillance camera, what's your initial reaction?
Well, first of all, I'm disappointed that the officers would conduct and comport themselves this way, but I surmise that this is just the way that these officers behave on a regular basis. They're out there unsupervised. They are members of a specialized unit, what some would refer to as an elite squad. I call them elephant hunters. And so we saw them act in a way that just was very natural, very fluid. They weren't worried about anyone else rolling up or passing by and recording them in their activities. We heard them manufacture probable cause for everything that occurred, from pulling Mr. Nichols out of the car to the savage beating that ultimately happened. We heard them feign that he was being extra aggressive, that he was reaching for their gun. And I'm certain that they were doing all of this because in the past, when anyone has gone into the station to complain, you get 4 or 5 officers to say that this person is making it up. Great deference is given to their version, and away goes any personnel complaint.
Wow, this is stunning. Olayemi, your response.
I think my sentiments began even before the video was released, honestly, because I mean, this is a country where the police kill over 1,000 people each year, 1,186 to be exact last year. And if we're lucky, we hear about a few of those deaths, and thousands of people have to protest, videos have to come out, and we have to beg for officers to be charged with murders we saw them commit. And most times they aren't. And even after they've been convicted, America will still violently defend those officers. But in this case, just 3 days after the killing, before the video release, before a national outcry, they come out and they tell us this is the worst, most brutal video they've ever seen. They concede that this is murder. They concede all the criminality. And then let me know what was going to happen. They're going to make an example of these 5 black officers, paint these 5 black officers to be, the face of police brutality, while getting to say, see, this isn't about race, and getting to pretend they've never heard about institutional and systemic racism. And that's not a defense of the officers. That's not meant to say, oh, these officers are being unfairly scapegoated. They're being scapegoated, and they are being made an example out of. But I think that is an important example and a testament to things that Black people already know in this country. And we know that the reality is very often that the Black police officers are not different, and very often more brutal than even the white ones. And we also recognize that you can be an agent of white supremacy even without a white person being in the room, and that will be allowed. You will be invited to behave in this way, but they will not protect you in the same way that they protect their own, because it's also not lost upon me that they plastered these 5 black police officers' faces everywhere, but we only just now heard that there was the 6th officer, the white officer, involved. So it gives me a lot to think about. It's horrifying, but the worst part is that it's routine, honestly.
Well, Sergeant Dorsey, let me ask you about that, because there was a response that said, wait a minute, officers get in trouble all the time. I remember in Ferguson when Darren Wilson killed Mike Brown, we had to protest to get his name said. I mean, it took a week or two before we even said his name. They only announced that when they showed the footage of Mike Brown stealing the cigarillo out of the store. These officers' names got plastered and their faces got plastered everywhere right away. They got fired immediately. Some people say this is a race thing in terms of how the police were dealt with. What do you make of that?
Well, here's the deal. I wanted to give the police chief the benefit of the doubt because she's a black woman, and I thought perhaps she acted so quickly is because she could really relate to the mother of Tyre Nichols. But now what I've come to understand, understanding her history and all of what's being reported, is that everybody is in damage control mode. She is really just trying to cover her butt. She came out with these officers being charged and arrested in advance of the video because had they not let everyone know that the officers were charged with murder and released that video first, they would still be tearing up Memphis, Tennessee. And so it was all by design. But listen, she's as guilty as those officers are, in my opinion. She's got over 2 decades as a law enforcement officer. She's been an administrator on 3 different police departments, and so she knows better. She set these young officers up to fail. She created this unit and decided to call it, of all things, Scorpion.
Sergeant, can you break down what this unit is? Sergeant, help me understand what this unit is, because a lot of people don't know what a Scorpion unit is, or in other cities they have other kind of special units. You call them elephant hunters. What is the goal? What is the purpose of this kind of unit?
So what happens when you have a specialized unit like this, and LAPD has one, our Metropolitan Division officers do a lot of the pretext stops where you might find someone who's out late in the evening, maybe their registration is expired and you've got a legitimate reason because you have a vehicle code violation and you stop this person in a high crime area and lo and behold, they have a gun in the car. Or you stop someone who may have narcotics on them. And so there's a reason and a purpose for these kinds of units to stop crime and deter crime. The problem is with this unit is that you have young officers. They have between 2 and 5 years on the job. They don't know anything. They're just one click above a rookie. They haven't earned the right to be in a specialized unit. So she puts these young officers in this unit, and then by her own admission, she doesn't give them a field supervisor. There are no supervisors. If you're going to have a unit like that, and I've worked specialized unit, Operation South Bureau Crash, you got to have field supervisors. You need sergeants out there like me who, when you hear your officers go code 6, you can roll up and put an eyeball on them and see what's going on. And if your officers get involved in the use of force,
let me jump to you real quick before we got to take a break. But Olayemi, really fast, when you hear this, when you hear the setup, the structure, the system, there's a unit that's reckless. They're out there wrecking shop with no supervision or oversight. They're young, they're untrained. How does that make you understand, in the minute we have left, what policing is in this moment?
That is not a mistake.
Go
ahead, Olayemi.
That it's honestly, it's not a mistake. These are deliberate choices. At the end of the day, this is a specialized unit. They were put there for a reason. And although this is, we talk about police brutality, it usually only makes it to the news when we see that somebody is dead. But police brutality is all the violence and the regular brutality that is a part of the job. So it only makes sense. And I think Sergeant Dorsey touched on this earlier, that they behave in this manner on a regular basis. This is conduct that has been rewarded by putting them in this specialized unit. And they are probably brutalizing people on the regular. This is just the day that they made a mistake.
Well, we'll certainly investigate that to find out, because we need to know exactly what's going on here. But y'all stay here. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. I want to talk about these body cameras and what it all means. Everybody stay right here. We got much more on theGrio with Marc Lamont Hill. Welcome back to theGrio with Marc Lamont Hill. We've been talking about the tragic police killing of Tyre Nichols and how it highlights systemic issues that are baked into American policing. I want to bring back my panel of guests. We have Cheryl Dorsey. She's a 20-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department. She's also an author and mother of 4 sons. And Olayemi Olurin is a movement lawyer and political commentator. Olayemi, I want to ask you something. When the protests happened in 2014, we had Ferguson summer. When we had the protests for Mike Brown, for for actually all the protests we could talk about in the last 6 years, what we saw, really interestingly, was a call for police accountability, and body cameras became one of the responses that police gave and that some liberal activists gave. You know, even in the last 2 years with George Floyd, we've said, look, we need to hold police accountable. We demand body cameras. Now, there were some of us on the abolitionist side of things, on the far left of this issue, who said, nah, body cameras ain't it. When I watch this video, and I hear the police, as Sergeant Dorsey said, sort of narrating the video in a way that would have you think, if you closed your eyes, that this guy was resisting, that he was fighting back. And if we didn't have access to the surveillance camera, not the body camera, but the surveillance camera, I might believe them more. For me, I'm just speaking for myself here, this was evidence that body cameras are not only insufficient, but may actually be a distraction from a more fundamental problem we have with policing. When you saw the body camera and how they narrated it, what did it spark in you?
I wish I could say it sparked something in me. How many times have we seen video footage of police callously murdering somebody? I think back to the video of Sean Reed being killed by police in 2020, you know. And the thing about this,
but do the body cameras make you feel like there's hope? I mean, are body cameras helpful for you? Are they? And if not, why?
I think it fundamentally misunderstands America, that America will be moved to change, to do the right thing if they witness Black people being abused. But that is inconsistent with the history of this country. We've always seen Black people being tortured. Lynchings used to be an event they attended, you know, for fun. They made postcards out of it. So I think it misreflects what is reality. America can see. We've been seeing for quite some time, we've been seeing video footage of Black people being killed by the police. And then all we see is a concerted effort to put that victim on trial, to hold them as a defendant, to justify it. So I think body cam footage, people painted as though abolitionists have a problem with reform efforts. We are very interested in reform that actually takes more power away from the state, but not things that are meant to be there as band-aids to placate things. Like, how many video footage do we need to see of Black people being killed before we understand? The issue is not that we don't know this is happening. It's not a matter of awareness. It's a matter of what the country condones and finds acceptable, because every time we see this footage, we watch our country violently defend it.
Sergeant, when you have a body camera, the thought was police will act differently. They won't be as reckless. They will be self-reflective in the moment, not because of conscience, but because they don't want to get caught. When I look at body camera footage, not just this one, but in other cases, I get worried that the body camera is not being used to hold police accountable as much as it is being used to protect their interests.
Well, you know, I think I know for a fact that, you know, police officers and the culture of police departments is that, you know, when you respond to these what we call hot shot calls or high priority calls, officers are amped up. They're amped up. Adrenaline is running, and they really get in a zone. They get tunnel vision. And so it's not that they don't know that the cameras are on them. At some point, they kind of come to as we see these officers, and that's when they start creating this audio record that's contrary to what we see. I think the cameras are important because without those cameras, we just have the officer's version. And we know that great deference is given to a police officer's version, and jurors and others find it hard to disagree with the version that an officer presents. And certainly when an officer kills someone, then there's only one version, and that's the one that they tell.
So, Sergeant, why? I get it when it's one-on-one, right? I get how we say, all right, we'll take this person's version. Now you got 5 people in the mix, right? I understand how we would be persuaded by the word of 5 officers. I do. That makes sense to me. A juror sees 5 police officers and they all tell the same story. Makes sense to me. I get why they'd be persuaded by that. What I don't get is why the 5 officers end up there in the first place. In other words, why doesn't one person stop this? I saw the same thing with George Floyd. Why doesn't one person step in and say, no, Officer Chauvin, don't do this? How is it that when you have that many people, not one person intervenes and says, yo, enough, y'all. All right, I'm not even going to snitch, but let's stop beating them. Why does that not happen?
Well, to that, I would say if sense were common, everyone would have it. And I go back to the fact that you've got inexperienced police officers, young on the job. They're much like, you know, pubescent teens who are at home alone for the weekend and their parents are gone. And it's party hats for everybody. Nobody has checked them. They've been running amok for an entire year and a half since this unit has been instituted, I would venture to say. And so when you don't check them, when you don't have a supervisor out there patrolling around who could roll up at any moment, then you wind up with.
But even aside from the supervisor, I mean, there's something about just. But Sergeant, there's something about just basic human decency. I mean, if 5 people are there, no supervisor, right? Wouldn't one officer say we've beaten him enough? I mean, I guess what I'm wondering is, does the group mentality make them more dangerous or less dangerous? Is it like, well, if everybody's doing it, I'm afraid to step in? Are officers afraid to step in and intervene and say, yo, enough, stop? They don't want to look like the bad guy. They don't want to look like the person who's not loyal. I mean, does the group think mentality kick in here?
It depends on the officers, and that's why it's so important when you hire these people that you do a proper background check. It's so important when you run and appoint them to a specialized unit with minimal supervision or no supervision, that you have officers who have the right temperament, the skill set, the experience, the tenure to do whatever it is that you're asking this unit to do. And all of those things were lacking on this particular unit, in addition to the fact that there was no supervision.
Well, I mean,
Olayemi, you said something earlier. Oh, go ahead, please jump on in.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, listen, we've talked about this, and I think we've all pretty much conceded that we recognize that they must engage in a certain level of brutal behavior. That's how they ended up on this squad. I think, we're doing them a favor that I think is looking at the evidence in a light far too favorable to them to present it as though this is just a matter of inexperience or rogue behavior, because even just on a base human level, your natural reaction, even without a supervisor, y'all are choosing to go and brutalize and beat somebody to death. So that's telling in and of itself. But the fact, again, is in these 5 officers, or the 6 officers are actually involved with this. We just haven't been talking about the 6th white officer. But these officers that are involved in this were placed there for a reason. It isn't like they're just 5, 6 bad hires. They are a reflection of the department head. This has happened. And I also think we have to remember, we see this brutalization all over the country. It can't just be a matter of they're not hiring these individuals the right way. It has to be a larger overarching problem, because, we're talking about this, but three Black men were killed back to back at the top of the year by LAPD. So it can't just be, a couple individual officers, or they're not hiring well.
Well, let me say this about the 3 Black men that were killed. It was actually 2 Black men and 1 Hispanic on LAPD, 2 of whom were armed. And so that's problematic, because if you are armed and violent, chances are it will not end well for you. The other gentleman was tased and ultimately died as a result of a heart attack. And I'm not sure, because we'll find out later on about Mr. Anderson. He was alleged to have been under the influence of narcotics. So I don't know what contributed to his death. Certainly being tased 6 times was not helpful and problematic. But here's the deal. I can promise you and assure you, having spent 20 years in an LAPD uniform and worked with a lot of folks that look just like me, that had I been there, or most of my peers, we would have stopped that. That would not have happened. And those officers would have understood that when Sergeant Dorsey rolled up on the scene. If they know I'm even working tonight, they're going to mind their manners, because I don't have to go code 6. I can just show up unannounced. And I absolutely would not have
and I guess that's what's
allowed that kind of...
And I guess that's what I gotta run y'all. But that is what is so stunning for me. I don't doubt you, Sergeant, that you would have stopped it. But we shouldn't need extraordinary people to step in to stop police officers from killing us. And that's a systemic issue. And that's something we got to really think about. I want to thank you both for joining me today.